Hi, everyone. Adam Vines. I'm the editor of Birmingham Poetry Review, and I'm thrilled to have you here to celebrate four poets I've admired for a long time, and I've had the great pleasure of publishing over the past few years. Dora Malech is here. She's a friend and a poet and a wonderful visual artist and a fantastic teacher and community leader. Matt Miller, who's a loser, but I still consider him a friend. No, I'm kidding. Matt Miller is a fantastic poet I've admired, and I think one of the finest long poem writers that we have writing today. And he teaches at Exeter, and I've had the great pleasure of meeting some of his students and standing on that firm ground that he stands on up there in nowhere land. And I love having him here. Lisa Faye Coutley, who's been a friend for quite a few years, and I've had the pleasure of teaching her books to some of my students who will be in here, hopefully. And I think that she was voted favorite poet and poem for Malech, the poem in one of the workshops that I taught. And most of the students in the class wrote an imitation poem of that poem. So she's helped me teach, even though she wasn't beside me in the classroom. And Alexis Sears, whom I met a few years ago at Sewanee, and have admired her work and published a poem of hers. And she just won the Donald Justice Prize, which is super wicked exciting. And that wicked was for you, Matt. And Alexis, when is that book coming out?
March 14th on
March.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be at AWP?
Yes. Will you be at AWP?
Yes, all of us will be, and we're all going to buy the book, and we're going to dote on you while we're there also.
Ooh.
Yeah. I thought I'd say a little something about BPR. BPR has been around since 1987. It was founded by Bob Collins, who was my mentor at UAB, and he's the one who kept me from stepping out of creative writing classroom when I thought it was a lit course. He pulled me back in, or I never would have taken a creative writing course. I was 25, 26 years old. And then he asked me to come on staff. So I started out as a staff member, worked up to co-editor, and then went off and got another useless graduate degree after that, and had the great pleasure to come back to UAB and take over the journal. And since I've taken over, it's expanded, it's swollen up to about 250 pages. Instead of being 3 times a year, it's once a year. And we've started a featured poet section, a featured essay section, quite a few back matter reviews, and I'm able to publish 30, 35, 40 poets a year. Actually, I don't have a page limit. I've had issues up to 320 pages before. So it just depends on if the binding can work or not for all the poetry I want to slam into the pages. But thank you so much for coming, and I'll hand it over to some of the staff members who are going to introduce the readers for tonight, and sit back and have a good time.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm going to introduce our first poet tonight. Is Lisa Faye Coutley. She is the author of Tether, Errata, winner of the Crab Orchard Series in Poetry Open Competition, and in the Carnival of Breathing, winner of the Black River Chapbook Competition. She is also the editor of the forthcoming anthology In the Tempered Dark, Contemporary Poets Transcending Elegy. She is the recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship, fellowships and scholarships to the Sewanee and Bread Loaf Writers Conferences, an Academy of American Poets Levis Prize, and the 2021 Gulf Coast Poetry Prize selected by Natalie Diaz. Recent prose and poetry appears in Brevity, Copper Nickel, Gulf Coast, Nell, Terrain, and Waxwing. Also, she is an associate professor of poetry and creative nonfiction in the Writers' Workshop at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Now I'm going to hand it over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Kaylee. Adam, thank you. Everyone at BPR for all that you do, thank you. If you are here on a Friday evening, you are amazing, and thank you. It is really nice to see everyone's face, and I'm going to try to stay to my time, so I'm just going to get right to it. I don't normally share my screen, but just in the event that anyone needs that, I'm going to do that just because it seems like the right thing to do. So let's make sure this works. Good? Yes? Okay, cool. I'm going to read 4 poems, provided that I can stay within my time here. And the first 3 are from the collection I've just finished. And I will finish with a single poem from Tether, which just came out in 2020 with Black Lawrence. And so this the first poem, I don't think I've ever read. I don't think I've ever shared it at a reading before, but because it was in BPR a couple years ago, I thought I would give it a try. So, a son might say, it's about time you got a muffin top. Yeah, no, stop. My God, you are conceited. Don't take everything so personally. Ugh, why should you get special treatment? Why can't you just not do that? Why would anyone eat that? Why would you wish for it? What will you do with flower petals? Take them home and watch them rot? I didn't buy them for you. They are hers. You should let her throw them in the garbage if she wants to. Mom, he is not your baby. You drive me crazy. Oh, look, the car seat is now a beer holder. This is not going to be a habit. What did I tell you? Duh. That is exactly why I don't tell you anything. Have you learned nothing from this week? If someone looks unhappy, leave him alone. You never know when to shut up. No, he's my baby. I'll hold him. I'll change his diaper. I'll feed him. You're doing it wrong. Should I do it like this? Why would I not ask you? Of course I love you. You're my mother. If you ask again, I'm going to hit you. Why do you ask stupid questions? Are you dumb as fuck? Yeah. Sleep well. See you in the morning. Drive safe. Call me if you need anything. That's kind of fun to read, actually. So the next 2 poems, like I said, are both from the most recent collection, Host, which I just finished, but I'm still sort of figuring out how it works if you're showing a poem and it's just appeared or is forthcoming somewhere, and like everybody's doing all of the Zoom readings and I don't really know the ethics of that. So I will say this poem was in Gulf Coast this fall. Anxiety. According to my therapist, is my body's way of saying I'm a gazelle, head bent to long grass, eating but heeding the puma who's tracking me. So I often stop, raise my face and wait, unable to chew until my brain scans the landscape to see I'm free from teeth. In the tall window of this office, Lucinda the magenta orchid screams or flames or celebrates even though it is January and there is no sky. There's an elephant straight ahead, Buddha to the left, a trampoline behind me, where once I rocked myself still for the dull pain in my pelvis. There are 2 silent clocks and no foul smells, no reason to fear this room wants to hold me by my wrists. Still, light pours in from the north when a man's hand erases a girl's thigh until she's the fish with a fluke for its will, forcing her to flash her shimmering fins, bald at the water's top for some lucky bird. Come pluck her, my parasite inside. I'll be the bird flying a half-life, singing against my own desire. 2, or I'm not a gazelle. I am pinned to the bed in a way only one of us likes. I am breath-locked behind the wire-drawn ribs of knowing you're running out of this week's money to feed your babies. I'm learning to cry quietly so as not to hurt everyone around me. Each year, I grow more sunflowers for the faces I'm holding underwater inside me. A bird of prey in the house is one less in the sky. I don't think we have any children here, but the next poem is definitely not for kids. I don't know what it would be rated, but it's like right up there. For reference, the italicized bits are not me. They are actually from a documentary, which you'll see the footnote at the bottom. I guess I should also say this poem is forthcoming in a journal. It's forthcoming in Barrel House. And so again, I don't know the ethics of this. I feel weird about that, but there you go. Synthetic Love. 1. In England. In case the car starts on fire while he's hang gliding, Everard pins a note to his love's chest so no one dies trying to save her. After their morning fuck, she lies with her sleeping face on while he winds the clock in his dead mom's room. 2. In Michigan. Synthetic love activist Dave Cat just wants to rub his wife's feet in early morning light, but organic women are not constant. Shishan is the anchor that keeps him stable in the room above his parents' garage. When he crates his wife to be shipped for repair, he kisses both hands and cries he'll miss her. 3. In Virginia. Gordon has 3 guns and 2 girls, one of which fires as fast as you can pull the trigger. A woman in stilettos and a thong is meat someone else has chewed and spit back on God's plate. He wants his dolls buried in the same box as him so they can become one dust. 4. In California. Slade the repairman's running out of vaginas and teeth again. Sex is almost like a violent act, he says, but these dolls can take a lot of physical abuse. 5. In Texas. Michael is grateful for his harem of 8 top-heavy dolls and the Swedes who are willing to sell real pubic hair for when his ladies wear out. In this high form of masturbation, he does not want to be seen as a pervert, but when he wakes at 3 a.m. with a raging hard-on, he goes to the garage, grabs his doll of choice, and goes at it. You can't do that with a woman, he notes. She can say no. 6. At Abyss Creations, USA. Receptionist Debbie says men are 50 and balding and never going to get women who look like this, who totally love them. Doll creator Matt feels best about men who've made that emotional connection. I've changed their lives for the better, like insoles in their shoes. These men come home from work excited to see their doll, and the food bill's way cheaper. So if you've not watched that creepy Guys and Dolls documentary, you should really check that out because it's some weird shit. It's been around a long time. I just can't start writing poems about it. This last poem is the only poem I'm going to read from Tether. I guess it's the longest poem I've ever written. It'll take me 20 minutes. Is that all right? No, just kidding. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for being attentive. Dear Mom, it's been an hour since the storm sirens began, yet I've felt freezing rain for days. Outside my window, the plastic bag snagged in the neighbor's tree is filling with wind, then letting it go over and again. I cannot stop breathing. It's been so long since we've spoken, I've given up trying to remember the last words you slurred. Your voice, a broken shell I cut my ear against. You and I both know I hope for no ocean. Now that you're dead, do you think love is wasted on the living? I have pretended to look for you in every face since I left the last room we breathed in together. Remember when you dropped your favorite dress at your ankles and stepped into the street without me? Each night, some woman stumbled home and tried to cook your recipes. Her hands just cut you. I was 7. I promised then I'd never let her hold me. My life began inside you. What else is there to say? When I listened to a machine beep your last heartbeat, I never rested my head against her chest. Dear Mom, I'm still waiting for that horse in my heart to stamp its hooves again. I can drop a potted plant from my roof 100 times, though it takes only once for it to learn to brace against the next impact. I'm sorry the world made it so hard for you to know the difference between a caress and a closing fist. I'm sorry you left yourself alone, lonely. Briefly, today's rain gathered on the slats of the deck and I admired the sky twice. Still, I wish I didn't need to see the trees, dark as charred bones, poisoned veins. I'm sorry I made you a disease I wasn't willing to admit I had for so many years. I close my eyes and try to summon your face, a hole blown through the center of every floor in this endless skyscraper inside me. Sometimes, in the mirror, I stick out my tongue and widen my eyes and cry like a baby who needs her mother to see her need. to be her initial witness, to prove she exists so she can stop hauling her body from city to city, bed to bed, searching for herself in the faces of strangers. When the temperature finally dropped, the rain froze a mosaic, angry, fragmented second sky the snow was working hard to cover now. The sun never showed today. Still, I feel her setting. As a girl, I'd sit by the shore and study her early bruise and her evening blood spilling under a door to another room of the universe, as if I knew every gray day to come without her. Thanks.
All right, next we have Dora Malech, who is the author of 4 books of poems, most recently Flourish from Carnegie Mellon University Press 2020 and Stet, Princeton University Press 2020. Her poetry has appeared in publications that include The New Yorker, Poetry, Poetry London, and Best American Poetry. She's an associate professor in the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University and the new editor of the Hopkins Review. And I'll hand it over to you, Dora.
Thank you. And thank you for that beautiful reading. That was wonderful. And also disturbing and intense. And yes, thank you. Thank you. It was really, really great to hear out loud. So I'm going to read a couple poems. And I love the idea of reading both from BPR and giving some love to some other lit mags out there that have been publishing some work. So I'm going to kind of go off of that idea and start with a poem that was in BPR in the spring issue. It's called From the Dance. And yes, it's based on a true story. Remember the boy who swallowed the pin from someone's corsage and came back to the prom later that night with the x-ray to prove it. His name faded out like the end of a radio hit, but his hospital wristband's dazzling grin in the black light remains. Whatever song I play, he keeps writhing, shirt sweat wet and face still shining, like something sharp is still inside him, inside me. And there's a wonderful online journal called To Peach, which is edited by Catherine Pond and Anna Morrison, Julia Anna Morrison. And I had a poem just come out there that is one of the more recent poems that I've written. I haven't been writing a ton lately. If anybody has like a secret tip they want to chat, drop in the chat about like how to write, you know, in a real successful way during the pandemic, please tell me because I need it. There's a lot of like bad television and not so much writing these evenings. Okay, this is called Rearview Mare, mare like mother in French. And it's just it's one of the few poems that have just come out of this weird time. And it's the only time I've ever been able to incorporate Def Leppard into a poem. So you're welcome. Rearview Mare. One lump or two is a leopard lyric I suspect no one has heard in full outside a moving vehicle since this century's turn. But even a window cracked and the leopard cranked can still confect me, spin me a drive-by sugar sculpture, car lot's wife, sucralost, neck stuck on swivel past the slashed prices, mouth ajar at a buzzing's searchlight sweep across these fillings. What makes another a mother's obvious just takes a second lump. Nursing this mom fat concoction scrawled to go with some off-brand of my name, doe a dearer, doe a dyer, dorsal fin, fine fat, I admit all I was willing to sell to sit idling inside a song. And I'm going to go to Flourish, which there should be a link in the chat. That is my most recent full-length book out from Carnegie Mellon Press in 2020. Really terrific year to launch a book. 10 out of 10 recommend. So that's to say, I'm very, very happy for this Zoom space, which is not only better than nothing, it's wonderful. So I'm really glad to be here and grateful to BPR for putting this together. I like reading this poem at this time of year because it was written now a while ago, but right on the day of the winter solstice. You know, the like shortest day and longest night. So this is a kind of the week in which the solstice is approaching, and I sort of enjoy reading this poem the most. To the you of 10 years ago now. Never fear. I know the difference between arteries and ardor, arbor and treed, my bower and a weak need, a harbor where one might moor tonight, and a port worth the oar's effort to come ashore for, a bit part and the serpent's gravid apple. I won't flatter myself first or lasting, or presume to fast and faint a martyr, making mockery of sacrifice, fatten for some sweet slaughter. I must believe that I'm not on your mind. On your body? Sure. That said, your body has a few ideas so bright that we might meet some night and render a dark room light as the last day before the world ends. That doom that was supposed to dawn today, but by now, hours worn on and in, we know there's no such luxury as fine as that finality for now. For now, at least, I'll have to kiss apocalypse goodbye, resign myself to this more mundane pain, the solace of the solstice, year's earliest sunset and its longest night. I tried to catch that fade of color without a flash. Both tries prove terrible. The horizon smudges up against the sky's blur like a child's heavy-handed landscape and inept erasure. They'll have to do. The pictures that I have of you will never do you justice either. Neither a camera's snap nor some synaptic crackle long elapsed can come remotely close to holding you. How else would you have it? You need never fear. I need you, but I only need you where you are. There, never far, never near. And I'm going to go one book back to this book called Stet, which does a lot with kind of like recombinant forms and constrained forms like anagrams and things like that. And I had a very kind request from Reagan to read from the final series in here, which is called After Plath Metaphors. It's in 9 short poems. Each of them is an anagram of Sylvia Plath's poem, Metaphors, and that's a poem that's metaphors for pregnancy, and obviously the 9 poems of mine are kind of each for a month of pregnancy. So I won't read all 9, but I'll read some of them. After Plath, Metaphors 1. Stealing a safe view, interstate still a smooth reed, nothing in mirrors, not need or glint, not even a least glimmer in the rims of a coupe so far. An on-ramp's best offer is belief. Yes, spell an easy does it, and I bite, finally sing ascent, an infinity. Big rig add a deep rumble now, the true coup down the highway. 3. Call me Big Ag, I brag, tending the feedlot and warehouse, silo and hormones, pen, seed, rib. From newly iffy memory, I recite whose maple syrup taps these are, and so on. Innings stint as dafter sieve, inning as moist ort. All in a different vein, I say, tiring, out of breath, panting as the balloon I tie taut swells. 4. Aviary, apiary, one warm swarm and flutter, bubble tea, puff pastry, lit fuse ore. I reel, dine a sea, greeting card sentiments, honey dripping into the moss-lined nest of a loon, wings riled in the offing. Motor revs, then idles. A magician's assistant, smiling to be sawed in half, saying, I'll be the one too. 6. I've been a flag left planted on a distant planet. Its sea singing in an empty shell, a file sighing stone to sand. See if I defy firmament. Petrie's eager agar, proverbial whore to culture, embrace what blooms in a windowless room, in a laboratory rinsed in sun's hot tints shining from the inside out. 8. I'm a full load of delicates, spin de siècle. I wait my turn as if willing paint to dry. Yes, no, maybe, no, not even. As if pushing at aspen apron strings to resist a nesting doll's tight fit. In a drawer between bones, free of name, see a Sunday roast, high tide, barge, loom, harvest moon, entire fire ant hill in amber. And as you might imagine, after 8 comes 9, and this will be my last poem, so thank you again. 9. I'm Loop the Loop, cat that swallowed the caboose, wild oat stuffed feed bag, my mailman's worst nightmare. Holes in a belt let out, dormant, nine-eyed serpent. I, darling hive, as is abyss, open infight, inner tubers, inner fryer. Pain, again. Endless Tetris turning on my if. A siege-long season arrives. I ante. Thank you.
Thank you to Dora Malech for that lovely reading. Up next, we're going to have Matt W. Miller read. His newest collection, Tinder the River, was published by Texas Review Press in 2021. He's the author of the collections The Wounded for the Water, Club Icarus, winner of the 2012 Vassar Miller Poetry Prize, and Cameo Diner. He's had work published in Gulf Coast, the Harvard Review, Narrative Magazine, Southwest Review, Massachusetts Review, Adroit Journal, and Crazy Horse. He's the winner of Nimrod International's Pablo Neruda Prize, the Poetry by the Sea Conference's Sonnet Crown Contest, River Styx's Microbrew Microfiction Prize, and Iron Horse Review's Trifecta Poetry Prize. A former Wallace Stegner Fellow in Poetry at Stanford University and a Walter E. Dakin Fellow in Poetry at Sewanee Writers Conference, he teaches English at Phillips Exeter Academy. He lives with his family in coastal New Hampshire, and we're going to let him read some poems now.
Thank you, Anastasia. Am I on? I'm working, right? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, BPR, for having us here tonight. Adam and everybody, Haley, and it's really great. What's great about this, I'm going to read poems from Tinder the River, my new book, which has about 5 of the poems were originally published in BPR. So I kind of lean on you guys heavily. So I'm going to read some of those. And I want to say, before I start, a big shout out to Hanana Zahir, who's in the audience, who spoke to one of my classes today about her new book, Lovebird. So if everybody should definitely check out that book. Thank you, Hanana. This first poem, so I grew up in this mill town in Massachusetts called Lowell, Massachusetts, where the Industrial Revolution started because of the Merrimack River, because of the Pawtucket Falls, the hydraulic power it created. And I wrote this book that deals in that area, the geological history, the indigenous history, the colonial, industrial, post-industrial history. And this poem is sort of the poet going back to the river of his youth, trying to seek some sort of and now I take a tongue into your mud, into your syringe and soda bottle banks, to beg your braided silk, your pennacook equay, your sliding tar of snake, your mouth of stones, your clavicle of royal and moan, your lover ghost thrown from Pawtucket Falls, your whitewater of bread and roses, your creak of locks and lifts, your leap from burning windows, your fished out crib of salmon and shiv, of shell casings and shad, alewife and boosted tires. Penitent palmed, I stand in this, your sun tussling dawn to call a song. My river, roll your blue-black big hips under the oxidized iron of cantilever and cable. Deluge and slip bridge ribs and sing between the red brick and brackish heft of textile mills, turn art galleries with crack alleys. You, bender of flashboard pins, come, sing to me, sluice me, double back and seduce me to your flood, tenor me down to your Irish blood canals, your Greek restaurant ghettos, fluorescent Cambodian groceries, chunk-heeled Brazilian bakeries. Your cobblestones exposed to sell some roomy history. Bones old and broken of flesh and sack and ash I call a song. You ferried me home. Now drink and spit me out where City Hall is crouched inside downtown's diverticula. Down to the fountain at JFK Plaza where my brother was suckered by a kid I wouldn't hit back. And there, just one of 10 police stations, Pollard Library, Nacarsar, Candav, Lowell High, its field house named after my grandfather. The calmed Masonic temple, the bring your own wine via tie, and bars and bars and bars, one for every St. Anne's, Immaculate, and St. Patrick's. In your hydraulic drop, prayers are toasted like toast to tilted pints. There, here, my palms unfold. Give willow to me against my flooded nights, against my broken rights. So you flow down and roll stones, old river, and moor me here for what I am and not. Wake my song and pluck me to your pulse. I'll stay down in your valley, drink your ink of water and dream myself back into you. Make me small again. Roll me in your lap, your mud, your moonlit blood. Supplicated by the greasy vents of a train car diner, I beg your lip of water to whisper. So I had that idea of a poet trying to get some inspiration from the river. Then I had the idea that the river's given us enough and might be a little pissed that we're asking, somebody might be asking for more. So I wrote a series of poems where the river answers back. And at first it was a female voice and a male voice. And then I, considered the whole problem of gendering nature in general. And so that especially a river, which would be fluid. I had this poem and it's just called Said the River When I Begged for Their Song. There's a little epigraph here. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name, Genesis 3:19. So this is the river answering back the poet. Very well, call me river, call me Merrimack, track me back to Pemigewasset, to Winnipesaukee. Call me mother, father, an apron-strung, deep-lunged lover. Call me confluence, call me flood and slug. Name me strong place and bathe me into fable. Dance me out as your tradition, your tributary. Construct me as your creation myth. Sing my hair of braided salmon, map my curves, my cock, my cunt, my nothing, my not. Mark the salinity, paint my Pawtucket Falls, and survey my alluvial belts of stone. Drag my gut for your stolen cars, your suicides, your sediment. Define me by your dams and your damned. Denotate my silt, detonate my banks, so I bleed and braid you with canals. Swim out, son of man, with brush of lips. You'll never find me in your box of words, your book of failed verbs. For I too wide, I too winding, I too glass of sky. And you will drown for this kiss on your swallowed tongue, an idiom. I wrote a lot about the people I grew up with, and a lot of the people are a lot of lost boys, guys who never made, friends of mine that didn't quite make it along the way, whether from violence, gangs, alcoholism. And then I started thinking about the chances of boys, and how making it, surviving to adulthood. And I read this great poem by Robin Costa Lewis, Math. And it's a prose poem about the mathematical chances of an African-American boy making it to the age of 18. It sort of pulled me into this poem. And if you ever were nerdy like me and played Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, you know what a saving throw is. It's this thing where, you know, if you want to survive dragons, fire, or a spell, you got to roll something on a 20-sided die. And then you modify that roll depending on your race, your class, your strength, your charisma, and all that stuff. So it might make sense. I'm just going to read the poem. It's called Saving Throw, after Robin Costalus's Math. Take a boy, my boy. Understand mortality rates have been falling for decades. Understand there is no safer time to be alive, to be a boy, white boy, blue-eyed son. But understand there are three kinds of lies. Understand the anecdotal to be gospel. Take a boy and assign a number to his flesh. Assume the number is his chance of being taken, world murdered before he reaches manhood. Assume that number is 18. Assume his dad is a 20-sided die to live, roll an 18 or higher. Assume the wicked of this exercise. Now roll. Now adjust the roll for the variables. Add for American, not black, for American, not brown. Add for not the city I grew up in and its downtown, its buses, its old alleys behind liquor stores. Subtract for his art. Subtract for his tender heart. Subtract for velvety, heavy velvet, hot velvet, breathless sadness for why he feels so sad sometimes. Divide for sex is gender, for who he is told he is, by who he is supposed to love, who he might want to love. Divide him by love. Subtract for our anger, our MAGA, our gaslit nostalgia, for what it might mean to be a man in a world frothing toward war. Add for how rich, subtract for how poor. Multiply by privilege, square by systemics, fraction for fentanyl, COVID, for the PM 2.5 pushed into his lungs. Add for no belt, no switch, no father's fist. Add for no pistol in the house. Subtract for lockdown drills, for AR-15s, bump stocks, Columbine copycats. Divide by the NRA, big pharma, big lots at Yale and Harvard. Take away for the hate you give, the villainy you teach. Subtract for the anger of lost white boys, subtract for the cruel white boys, add for saintly boys in makeshift cathedrals. Add for my thick back, my tears, my laugh, subtract for my bark. Add for Isaac, subtract for Ishmael. Add for the strength of woman, for his mother's love that might be enough all on its own. Take a boy, take all the boys, roll their bones. I'm going to read this poem that was in BPR last spring. It's a poem, I hate myself in this poem. This is like, because I went back and wrote a lot of things about people I grew up with, and I always wonder about the privilege and right to write about these people, particularly this one kid who was shot going home from school one day when I was a senior. This poem's called Ars Poetica. How to recall that industrial maroon carpet, homeroom, overpacked public high school stink of shit, weed dip, spit, blood, pencil shavings, armpit. How to bring back the boy who sat in the back corner every morning, quiet Cambodian kid. How to remember his face, his voice, his name years later or even days later. Oh, what we didn't see. How to talk about how he was shot walking home and at school the next day made it our drama. How to be shot walking home from chess club to find out we even had a chess club that met after last bell when I drive an old Buick out to practice. How to be caught up in a whiskey pom-pom narrative of football games, parking lot brawls, which packy wasn't checking IDs and being watched by the cops. How to imagine him walking home across the lot where the Jarvis family once had a car dealership. How to imagine that lot where my dad bought a Buick, not the one I drove, but that long white station wagon. How to be that all alone boy as the car rolled up. I picture that olds full of kids who crowbar Jamie. How to kill a friend trying to quit a crew, the Tiny Rascals, Asian boys. I think about that time some buddies of mine came at me at a city pool for thinking I ratted them out. How to be a kid and quit that life and have to bleed for it, and hearing from a history teacher he was a smart kid and wanted to go to college and get out of here. How to bleed out alone into that potholed cement. I almost cracked an axle cutting through there once. How to be cooked into a cautionary tales for the white kids. See what happens? And their moms, can't they just fit in? How to be a mother at home weeping for a son carried, it turns out, from one killing field to another. How to be called gook and feel small and afraid because we pick on him but steer clear of them. When letter jackets harass you just like their daddy cops do. How to be next morning whispering, he sat over there. And look how we circle up to sigh and hug each other. How to forget his name. How to never really know and never really try to find out beyond Googling gang slangs that happened in Lowell in '92 for a damn poem. How to do a half-ass autopsy on his brief headline of history and rivet his corpse onto the back fat of my memory. How to peddle in his flesh and colonize his death. And I'll do this one more quick one. It's called Autobiography. It's actually the first poem in the book. For a moment, I was a failed skip of stone sunk into the river. For a moment, I was the river purling in long last shadows of September. For a moment, I was a skinny grizzly spitting into a beer can. For a time, I was Christmas lights wrapping around town smokestack until I became a book filled with baby teeth. For a while, I was a boy painting the portrait of a queen. For a while, I was a child queen. For a while, I knew the switches to every light, knew the angles of every kiss in the autumn night, and shaped morning from the curve of her hips. For a while, I spelled the difference between church and lips. For a while, I was young. For a while, I was son. For a while, I was father of a million reasons not to pray. For a while, God begged me for an apology. For a while, I was an apology walking the edge of the dam. For a while, I was dust on the floor of a cotton mill, swept by a broom out into summer. For a while, I was summer, until liver-spotted clouds blew over the dunes to fling the monarchs into Mexico. For a while, I was oil mill, fir, and yucca tree. After all, sap ran desert west, after sugar, maple, elm, and pine. For a moment there, I made up my mind to be worm for the plover. For a second, I believed I was enough vessel for my children. For a night, my wife was able to rest on our blade of stars. For one moon, the sea could trade us. For the sun, for one dawn, we filched the horizon. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Matt, for reading for us. I know we all really enjoyed it. Next up, we have Alexis Sears, who is the author of Out of Order, winner of the 2021 Donald Justice Poetry Prize, forthcoming from Autumn House Press in 2022. She earned her BA in writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University and her MFA in poetry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her work has appeared or will appear in the Cortland Review, Hopkins Review, Northwest Review, Literary Matters, Poet Lore, and elsewhere. And I'll give it to you, Alexis.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Adam. Thank you to everybody at BPR. Thank you to my fellow, I feel like I'm giving like an Oscar speech. I'll keep this quick. Thank you so much, audience, readers, everybody. It's been really, really delightful. I think I want to share my screen like Lisa did. So I will do that. I want to start with a poem. Ooh, actually a screen share might not work. Let's see. No, okay, so I won't. But I want to start with a poem that's actually a happy poem. I think a lot of poets, I'm definitely not alone in this. We think that writing a happy poem can be really challenging. But this one came really naturally. I actually wrote it when I was at the Sewanee Writers Conference, which is where I met Adam. So this poem is called Daughters, and it takes place in Sewanee, Tennessee. We spend too much time writing about sadness, Trevor says. He's right. The poet's sadness is such an irritating trope. I'm glad this summer, here in Tennessee, I've witnessed what might be joy snug in my shoes. I've witnessed what could pass for healing, that old hit-miss word so overused by shrinks and friends who suffer endlessly, who make fast friends with chewed-up fingernails, tangled ends of trendy bobs and updos, far too tired to keep playing the role. I too am tired when almost strangers tell me they've admired my poems for being honest about suffering, Good for my art, apparently. Our suffering comes from wanting. An old website buffering informs me Buddha said, but here, right now, in Tennessee, I hardly want. Right now, my blood is carbonated bliss, Sprite. How have I become this overflowing sweetness? Bubbly, fellow writers call me. Sweetness from wine on tongues, our feelings of completeness, somehow foreign but familiar at the same time. Mosquitoes and familiar smells of fresh paved gravel, liquor. Were those we feared, those who we never thought we'd be, the happy ones. I always thought I wanted daughters nothing like me, not like whispers and the chaos of the city, their inky sentences colliding. City girls obsessed with being pretty, gritty and acidic smartass words. I still question everything sometimes, the still Sewanee ponds, the daily pops of Advil. But questions lie beneath my cool gray covers, total outcasts now. The word joy covers my skin like swelling bug bites. I discover that happiness is neither strength nor weakness, the possibility that my own weakness isn't weakness. Maybe I should speak less about this so-called angst. It'd be okay to have daughters like me. I'll be okay, I realize, frightened, untarnished array of my worries on a platter, wooden, clean, relieved though. Who knows? Maybe now I'm clean, absolved, a different woman, finally seen. Okay, so let's do a depressing poem now. This one is called Golden Years, funnily enough. Okay. Golden Years. When Christine asks me to describe my history of depression, I tell her about the Christmas video. I'm 4, maybe 5, twirling a pigtail while my brother opens his toy race car. You looked so sad, my mother said years later. I didn't realize. Christine hands me a box of tissues and I joke that I can't believe I'm crying. At night, I wander in dark lit rooms while Bowie croons through headphones. I dream of handcuffs, of running pointy fingers through a young man's curls, a serrated knife scraping a slope of a smile onto his flesh. Even the sun is a philanderer, bringing home roses to every woman on earth, its rays shading its face like a cap. This next poem is called Mirror, and it's called Mirror because I wrote it and then halfway through, it starts to go backwards. So all the lines repeat twice, but in reverse order. Mirror. Last night, in sleep, my mother wasn't sick. The dream was so remarkable because it was so unremarkable. I sat the way I like, my arms and ankles crossed. She peered over my yellow sweatered shoulder. Somehow I've forgotten. What did she wear? Hey reader, do you think there's anything lovelier than the mundane? The craving for some ounce of normalcy has left me dizzy, parched. When I'm not Googling symptoms or chemo caps, I feel fine, you know? I'm truly fine, I feel. Fine, you know, I'm truly fine when I'm not. Googling symptoms or chemo caps, normalcy has left. Me, dizzy, parched, then the mundane, the craving for an ounce, my reader, of something, anything that's lovely. Somehow I've forgotten what. Mom, where? Peering over my yellow sweatered shoulders. The way I like my arms and ankles crossed was so damn unremarkable as I sat. The dream was so remarkable because last night in sleep, my mother wasn't sick. This next poem is called 7. It's about a jerk at a bar, and I'm sure every single person in this Zoom room can relate to that. So 7. So tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate your life? Somehow, again, I found myself inside a stranded bar with made-up drag queens, doughy bankers. Far away, the girls I came with flirt with men in navy cargo pants and boat shoes. When was that in fashion? I'm all set to leave, depart in silence, pizza my reprieve, until the strange man corners me and chirps, what would you rate your life? Long-nailed, he slurps what could be one of those Long Islands, though I just don't care. Probably years ago I'd beam, but now I want to take a knife and twist it into his perfect dimple. Life? A rating system? No hello, not even a cheeky wink? But I choke out, 7? His mouth falls open, slug-like eyebrows raised. A pretty girl, just 7? I'm amazed. I'd give my own a 9. 32 years near perfect. Girls behind me clink their beers, engage in bored, half-hearted conversation. Skewered shrimp abound, the pink crustacean I envy. Yes, I'd rather jab a stick through me than talk to this simple-minded dick. He presses on, look, I'll be honest, I think it's rather sad you'd classify your life so low. I mean, how old are you? Too young to be so jaded. Cheese fondue, tiny cocktail dresses, toothpicks, just me. He looks at me not with disgust, but hardly warmth, intrigue, or lust. I picture pizza men, my couch. I'd skip this lecture in some other sweet world, but now I'm stuck. Seven's fine, I say. It's passing. Fuck, I want this to be over. Yeah, I guess, he snorts, but don't you ever, obsess about how things could be? Why settle? Fake it till you make it. I think you should make better decisions and you'll find the world isn't so bad. Later, I'll wish I'd twirled and stomped away, or kneed him in the gut, used mom's kickboxing skills, jab, uppercut, blinded the cocky sucker. How dare he? A stuck-up bastard whose reality was some sick fantasy. Clearly, he never had gone through any hardship whatsoever. Better decisions, really? I'd decided to be so young and old at once, divided into 15 equally punctured parts. Yes, when I got my Master of Fine Arts, I chose to lie face down all day. A child, I simply checked a box, cross-legged and smiled, that said I wanted my old man to die. My God, who is this freakish dimpled guy? But reader, you and I both know the facts. I'm the kind of girl who never quite reacts, the kind whom others pity for attracting guys who what? Love their own lives, love acting superior? Later, I'll wish I'd said, well, anything, but it fills me with dread to even dream about making a scene. So I just laugh, yeah, I see what you mean. Nice meeting you, and hope to leave composed. By now, I know the pizza place is closed. Okay, so I think I have time for a few more. This next one was published in BPR. It's called How to Forget That Night. How to Forget That Night. If anyone asks, that night never was. There was never a night that was anything less than moonlit, dreamy, perfect. Those nights happen to other people, not you. You go months without whispering the word, write poems about cicadas and jicama. Your neighbor's dog still adores you. Romaine turns tar black in the fridge. The TV remains off. Perhaps nothing has changed, even when, some nights, coyotes howl, sirens offer sharp-toothed migraines, and you epitomize alive, sleeping through the labor of breathing. Don't you get it? Don't you realize how lucky you are? Okay, I'm gonna do two more. This next one is called Hair Sestina, and as the name implies, it's a sestina about my hair. It's a little bit more than that. So I'm biracial, I'm half black and half white, but my dad passed away when I was a kid. So this poem is basically just about me sort of teaching myself about Black culture and really trying to understand what it means to be a Black woman, or a biracial woman. So this is called Hair Sestina. I'm 24, and yes, by now I know I have a problem. Oh, but don't we all? Everyone jokes as if it's really brilliant, but not like this. A slippery chunk of life has slid on by, and still I am without an inkling of real knowledge about Black hairstyles. Some bus driver says, you're Black in name, but you will never really know their struggles. There. It sticks. I'm left without a comeback, since I know it's true. She's all proud now and continues on. Your life seems easier than most. Gee, that is brilliant. I'm not sure if I'm hurt or not. A brilliant professor told me once her hair dyed black as licorice bites. Sometimes, in life, you'll want to cry but can't. Just so you know, the answer is to bite your thumb. That's all. My cluelessness, though, soon I'll be without a thumb, a life, a man to dine with, out of time. I only care about hair now. Brilliant Black scholar is what I aim for. I spend all my leisure time these days researching Black hair looks. I nod, I practice, hope I'll know a twist out when I see it. I watch Life, the one with Eddie Murphy, plan a life where someday I'll have cornrows, braids without the insecurity. Should I? Oh no, no flashcards. What's the point of being brilliant when I wear white girl hair to Sam's Club, lack inheritance and understanding? All I know is this. It wouldn't be right to call what happened to me abandonment. See, life can be too hard for us, including my Black father, once Marine, 6'2", without someone to speak to, even me. Not brilliant, but he could have helped me come to know my hair, my Blackness, self. Oh well. Without some emptiness, what's life? 24, brilliant, accomplished. All I know is what I don't. And I have one more. This is called September. I know I could do better. I could go outside, get some sun. Instead, I watch from my window as the snow falls, as if God is grating Parmesan over the city. Say when. I've never had the chance to love desperately, but I felt rage worm its way through my stomach like a parasite. So many things I cannot say aloud. It would be wrong to bring a child into the world to watch me suffer. To suffer with me won't win me any friends. Am I worse off than anyone else, though? I sip my dark roast, spell my name in carrots on the counter. I am no longer, at least, a monument to damage, my ribcage a coliseum, its broken edges jabbing at the sky. The faint sounds of earth, wind, and fire play in my kitchen, and I smile, even shimmy a little. None of us will last forever. Someday, maybe soon, everything will ache a little less. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and all of our readers. So we do have some time. We're going to open up the floor for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions to ask of our poets, now is the time. Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can drop your question down in the chat, and we'll make sure that it makes its way into the rotation.
I've got a question, I guess, to start us off. I have a question for Matt Miller. I feel like in the poems that you read, there's a lot of tension between naming and being named, speaking, being spoken to, and then like in particular, things that are, and then what we call those things, the names that we give them. So I guess I was wondering if you could speak to how your poetry or this collection sort of negotiates this problem of the name versus the thing that actually is.
Wow, that's a great question. I wish I had a really pithy answer for it. Yeah, I mean, geez. I mean, that's what we do in a way, you know, as poetry, like, you know, we name the world or rename the world, and, you know, or try to find words to hold on to the world, even though they're fleeting and flimsy and language always falls short of that. And the way things are named and renamed by, I don't know if I have a really good answer. Like, it's definitely a thing I've worked through, but I'm not sure like I know how to like speak to it. And across different languages and cultures and things like in time periods. I don't know. I do not have a good answer for that right now. Sorry.
That's a good answer.
I wish I could name the answer. But I think I'm always intrigued by that anyway. Like, you know, how are things named? What do names do? And how do names? And I talk to my students about this. How does giving something a name box it in and limit it? And the name you're born with, all of a sudden you have all the connotations that go with that. And if someone decides to name you this or name you that, then all of a sudden does that close you down? Does that give you more possibilities? You're working within, you know, to define something, to name God limits, you know, puts a limit on it in some ways, you know. And I always I think that's always in the back of my head, like how we do that and fail to do it constantly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else hear the music from Jeopardy playing in their head?
Always.
No, but now that you mention it, now it is. Any other questions?
I mean, I've got more questions. I don't want to
Go for it, Anastasia.
but I Okay, so this is for Lisa Faye Coutley. I was wondering, I guess, if you could talk about how you feel like the poem works as like, because like in A Son Might Say, you're kind of speaking through your son. And then in Synthetic Love, the poem is acting at once as like, it's like a dialogue. There's this source text that you're drawing from, or documentary in this case, but also kind of your reception to it. And then in Dear Mom, the poem is sort of a letter, an invocation. So I was wondering if you could talk about those different facets of the poem and who is speaking and are you speaking to, and how that manifests when you're actually writing your poetry.
So I feel like you're asking me a form and content question, right? And you're asking me a little bit of like, does the content inform the form, and how does that, yeah. So yeah, I mean, for reference, A Son Might Say is actually, well, my son isn't here. A Son Might Say is actually comprised entirely of quoted material, things that I have been the recipient of. so I basically just collaged that shit. And it just, I suppose I was just kind of keeping this running tally of comments, and then thinking about, I mean, I'm a like anyone, I recognize that a poem needs to take a turn. And so in collaging those things, it would have been obviously very different to begin with the sweet things, or the kind of sweet things that come at the end, right? And so in terms of form, I think I started with the first thing that I found most insulting and went from there, and then came down to try to find a sweet moment. And so that the form of that poem, mostly it was either just sound or the order in which the retorts came to me, to be honest. The Synthetic Love poem was maybe one of the first poems. Anxiety and Synthetic Love were the first poems where I've been playing with prose and the forward slash, which I'm just really kind of geeking out about, and I'm like way late to that party, I guess. But each of those snippets I think feels different to me, because that documentary is so strange and so weird, and each one of those guys, I mean, there's literally a documentary of every single one of the people under the numerics there. I'm drawing from the things that they said or the things that they do in the course of this documentary. And so when I read it, I feel differently in each section, because I kind of was just trying to try to encapsulate like the essence of each of those men, which was just a strange documentary. Dear Mom, this is a really long answer, but Dear Mom, in general, I'm going very long, but Dear Mom actually took me, I would say, so what? I wrote it in 2017. My mother died in 2005. I have written so very many poems for my mother, about my mother, despite like mentors saying, stop writing about your dead mom already. Like that's probably enough. You've written about it like all of the places. And of course, just me being me, then I just take it as a challenge to like keep writing about it, because, but actually that's not true. I mean, there's just an urgency that I couldn't stop writing about that material if I wanted to. And I guess I was sitting right here, and there was a plastic bag in the tree, and it just kept filling up. And my mother was on life support at the end of her life. And so that image just pulled me in, and I just was thinking about a lung, right? And then just, this is not the thing anyone ever wants to hear a person say, but that whole poem just tumbled out of me in one drop. But it had been building for like all of those years, right? And I think I needed that much distance to gain some perspective and to be able to just address her. And so it took the form of a letter, which in truth feels really risky, because it's such a dour poem, so sad, I guess. But Dear Mom, like what a hokey fucking title, right? And so I don't know. Does that kind of start to give you an answer to that question?
Totally.
Have I bought us enough question and answer time? Sweet.
Awesome. So I actually have a question for all the poets. So chime in if you have an answer. But I was wondering, what are the things that you do when you're not writing that aid your writing? So do you have like hobbies, crafts? Do you binge shop and lose your mind while you're, writing a sestina? Or tell me the things. What are the secrets?
Think about Adam and try to get inspired.
And I think about Matt, thinking about Adam, thinking about Dora, and
I have
was
a
a weird
long
fucking
list
answer,
of
Matt.
people that I think about, and it's all four of you right at the beginning. And then from there, we just drop into the romantics.
I think you really answered the question. I was sort of joking in the middle of the reading, saying like, does anybody have any tips on, how to be writing more during the pandemic? But you asked that question, and I have like a really quick list in my head of things that help me write that I'm doing like none of now, and I thought, oh, well, that's it. Basically anything away from a screen and in movement, I think is like right on. And whether that's like taking a walk or exercising or like being outside, in the garden, drawing, any of those things. I think I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with screens, and I do plenty of like looking up words I like, and things like that, messing around, doing research. But I really do think just like being away from that and in a different kind of motion can unlock things.
Yeah, Dora, when you said that thing about how do you guys find time, a way to write during the pandemic, I was like, yeah, I'm hoping for some clues too, because I have felt like completely a dried canteen for the last 20 months, especially after the book came out, and also during the pandemic. And but I spent a lot of time in the water, surfing, and play some guitar really badly, and a little skating, working out. But I think I'm filling up time so I don't sit there and not write, because it's really frustrating these days. Like nothing's coming. So if anybody has any tips for us how to get moving.
I have tips. I guess the only thing that I know how to do that really actually works is to engage in a 7-7 or a call response with somebody. So 7 poems, 7 days, poem a day, every day. That was how I wrote Dear Mom.
Oh, that's cool.
Because there's pressure, right? You're accountable to somebody. Like you have to send a poem by midnight. And so I generally like to try to exchange with someone who I feel is a stronger writer than I am. So then I won't just send like any old shit. You know what I mean? But otherwise, to answer your question, Haley, I'll shoot pool or garden. I think shooting pool for me is the most meditative thing that makes my body go quiet in the way that writing makes my body go quiet. But otherwise, I'm just a total fucking spaz. And so those are like my only gardening, shooting pool, and writing are my meditative things.
For me, my two main obsessions are sleep and music. So I'm lucky I dream a lot. So dreams come up in my poems. I know a lot of people don't really have dreams, or they forget their dreams by the time they wake up, but luckily that's not a problem of mine. My obsession with 90s rock might be a little weird. It got to the point where my thesis advisor was like, why is Courtney Love in all your poems? But I think writing about things you're obsessed with just makes the poems better. So sleep, music, but like everyone else, I haven't been very prolific lately either. So tips, always welcome.
I had a really specific question. Hey, everybody. Hey, Matt.
Hi.
Hey, Adam and Lisa, Hanana, Nana. For Dora Malech, the cover of your book, Flourish, really intrigues me. I feel like I could that's when I buy art, is when I feel like I could look at it for the rest of my life and see something different. And I look at the cover of that book, I think it might be in medium pencil and maybe India ink and watercolor, but I see birds, I see women kissing trees, I see darkness, I see light. I just wondered what you see and why you chose it.
Well, so I don't know it's very kind of you to ask that, and I'm so glad. So this is my artwork on the cover, and so you've like doubly made me very happy. Thank you.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, when I was saying that like losing myself in drawing is one way to like get me going, I think when I'm at my happiest, you know, I'm like going back and forth between poetry and drawing. And this was a moment when I was doing that a lot, but I often will build up a drawing or a painting through like a process of like accretion. You know, it's almost like a palimpsest, like layering things on top of each other and then pulling things out with different like emphasis. But yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of why I wanted, you know, I wanted something, because flourish like having to do with like growth and thriving and like the natural world. But I also kind of wanted to play, because I think, you know, I have a weakness for like turns of phrase and wordplay, and, you know, I kind of can't like resist a rhyme or like a sound pattern. And so there's kind of like maybe a cheekiness to like calling it you know, like a big dramatic flourish. And I thought this had like a quality of that too, which was, you know, like all these lines kind of flourishing around. So this is, I mean, it's not, it's like representative of my drawing, in the sense a lot of my drawing is like very obsessive and time consuming and like meditative in that way. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's the same, you know, it's the process of like finding things, I think was the same, you know, very, for you as a viewer, like kind of mirrors what I was going through as in creating it. So thank you. I'm glad you find it something that, you know, that you can kind of spend time with. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And I'm absolutely astounded. It's your artwork.
Thank you so much.
Well, Shelley, I showed him yours too behind me. So
Did you?
love that you asked Dora about,
Oh, that's you. That's wonderful. Adam was telling, yeah, we were asking about that painting beforehand. I love that.
Well, thank you so much. It was, I made him look at so many poems. Like I owed him that big of a painting. And it's also, I have to, it's a copy. I mean, he gave me something. I wouldn't do that if it were for money or something. Like it's a copy or a replica of someone else's painting. So I can't take 100%. It's not like theirs though, is it, Adam?
Not at all. It's just influenced by, which kind of brings me to a question that I had for Dora. You know, Bloom's anxiety of influence, and I was thinking about that 9-part series that you have, which is wonderful. And hearing you read it, and the metaphors, you know, just piling on top of each other was just this explosion, this kaleidoscopic vision. And I wondered about your anxiety of, you know, using someone like Sylvia Plath as an influence for something that's so important to your life and is obviously steeped in autobiography. How did you negotiate that?
Yeah, that's for that, I think because it was such a strange, like the process of Anna, like using a constrained form to work with her, it was kind of like the anxiety was in making that first leap where, you know, where you're kind of like, am I going to do it? And then once you start doing it, kind of like the drawing, I really lost myself in it. And I find that process very seductive. I mean, because it does feel like the language is like working with you in a way that I don't always feel when I'm writing in a more narrative way. I do feel like there's some like just turning it over, not necessarily in like a mystical way, but in a practical way where it's like you can't control everything. And so you kind of have to trust what you find. But in terms of the actual relationship with Plath, I mean, it's not one of her most famous poems or most anthologized poems. It's a very kind of little slight poem. And so I kind of liked that. It's not like, you know, I'm going to bring Sylvia Plath to the world, but there was a sense in which I felt like I was like nurturing this maybe kind of more overlooked poem that means a lot to me. So that was kind of fun. And she, I think, is more of a playful poet than some people who maybe have just read, like, you know, the couple of anthologized, you know, Daddy and other poets. Like, I just think she's so playful and like sound driven, that it just was a pleasure to like spend time with her work that way.
Thank you.
I had a question for Alexis. It was about the sestina you wrote. I personally have a lot of trouble writing sestinas, and I was wondering, what made you want to write a sestina about your hair? Was it the sestina that informed, or was it the type of poem that informed the subject matter, or vice versa?
That's a really good question, because for the longest time, I really didn't like sestinas. This is going to sound like total blasphemy, but Elizabeth Bishop has this sestina that I was just like, no, like, I don't like it. But I think in a lot of my poems, like the form and the content, I think in all poems, the form and the content kind of inform each other. And for me, this idea of not knowing about Black hair and, you know, feeling like kind of an outsider, even though I'm technically like part of this community, it had a lot of, I was ruminating on it a lot. And I think when it comes to things like refrains and repeating end words, it's good to write a poem that has repetition like that. So I chose the words I chose and just had them like over and over and over again, but in different orders, sort of just because like that's how my thought process was, you know, thinking about this over and over and over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question for Matt. I was saying earlier how much I admire the long poems that he writes, and do you set out to write these poems, or do they just start mating and replicating over and over and over, or do you think in terms of the long haul, as a novelist would say, instead of the shorter poem?
Yeah, I have some poems that are like 15 pages long, and I don't know why I do that. I really work hard to write really short, and it always keeps sprawling out. Sometimes it's a plan, sort of like this one long one I had in my last book, which is really long, but it was more, I kind of thought it was more of an essay anyway in verse. And I think I've been reading Ann Carson's class essay and working with long essays with some students, and I try to like, and I kept working on it as a prose piece, and it just wasn't working. And it was actually a student who was trying to write her own long essay as a poem, and I was like, oh shit, that's what I gotta try to do it that way. And that sort of gave me the form, and all of a sudden it started to come together, and I could see how the energy of the lines and stuff. And then there's this one poem that ends Turn to the River that was actually in BPR. I didn't read it because it takes like 15 minutes to read. That one I really intended, I wanted to have this like, you know, last big, you know, power ballady, heavy metal 80s, you know, last song, you know, like poem of the book. But I was really thinking of Hart Crane's The Bridge, you know, just coming up short against that, like this, having the central image that I had to go around. And there's a smokestack in my hometown that it's named after a Pennacook Sachem Wanalancet, but, you know, and it's draped with Christmas lights every Christmas time. And the symbol of industrial age, you know, stuff. And like all those things coming together, this, you know, this Christian holiday with a Pennacook, you know, name attached to it, industrial capitalism. I'm like, I got to write about this thing. And that one I sort of intended to go long. Not always though do I tend to go long. They sort of start to eke out. I try to cut them back, but sometimes there is a plan to like, all right, I'm going to try to stupidly take on these long poems and how to hold them together to the end. Like, you know, I'll throw it to someone like you, like, does this make any sense? Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, this is ridiculous, you know? I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, I mean, the big long ones, I sort of like, you know what, I think this is more of an essay, a bigger idea that I'm trying to take on. So I think I'm going to use the long form and hopefully all the parts hold together in some way.
Keep doing it, Matt.
keep publishing them, Adam.
Yeah.
But thank you for that.
question for Lisa. So I really enjoyed listening to Synthetic Love, and I particularly thought like the subject matter was really interesting. So I was wondering about your writing process from watching the documentary to actually writing about it. And oh, I guess this is a two-part question, but also like if you ever considered writing about it from the perspective of the dolls themselves.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So I think I said that it's an older documentary. And I, during my MA at Northern Michigan University, so we're talking like 2006-ish, came across this documentary I was taking a models, copies, and simulacra class. And this was like the ultimate thing to write, to explore for this class. Like I just stumbled along this. I don't even know how I found the documentary. At that time, I wrote poems from the perspective of the men themselves. And then, yes, over time did explore the perspective of like the female, the doll. There's like some moments where the doll interacts with the man, you know, but I hadn't actually watched it in a really long time. And I guess maybe like a year or something ago, I watched it again just to see if, you know, just when you notice new things when you watch a thing again, right? And was just so struck by, I don't know, just the total strangeness of it. And I just wanted to sort of just document it in a new kind of a way, and to sort of let each section take its own shape based on kind of the vibe I got, I guess. That's not really the right word, but the way that each of those dudes made me feel when I watched that documentary. And so I tried to let the form encapsulate some of that. Like, I don't know if it's recognizable, but that Gordon guy in Virginia, like he's just a straight weirdo. I mean, they're all a little weird in my opinion. I should maybe be more compassionate about that. But like the first guy's like very organized, and when you pan into his house, it's like all of these model airplanes and different kinds of models, and he's like he very much does like love his dead mom. And I just was like so struck by the order of his life, and I wanted the chunk of information about him to reflect that. And as such, so Gordon's feels a little bit weirder and a little bit more punchy, because he was just like he reminded me of like a militia dude or something, you know. And so I wanted the forward slashes to feel a little bit like they were cutting, but it was like still this forward movement. Anyway, yes, I there's no amount of well, I could just keep mining it, I guess, and you should too. We all should. It's just weird material.
Thank you.
Did I even answer you, Kaylee?
No, you did. And the documentary sounds really interesting. I should go find it.
I mean, you just Google guys and dolls. It is really easy to, I mean, it's out there. And
we just like hearing you talk. That's all. Just talk.
And the doll, I mean, like if you're not familiar with The Real Doll Beyond like Lars and the Real Girl, which is just a terrible representation of what actually this is all about. But like you can order a doll to your specifications. If you want an 80-year-old pregnant doll, you're getting it. Like it's the weirdest thing.
I feel like this is now an interesting take on American Girl.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming in. It's getting close to 7:30. It's a Friday night, so everybody still has time to go out and do whatever kind of debauchery you're into. If it's like me, you're going to eat some leftovers and then crawl into bed and watch something really bad on TV, which has been my life the past 2 years, except for this lovely, again, celebration of these poets and seeing all of your beautiful faces from all over the country, and little felines jumping in people's laps, and plants behind you and all that wonderful greenery. It's been pretty fantastic. I'm going to do another one of these in a few months, and I'm going to try to keep them up. I'm going to try to, this is something that, I've always resisted technology, but this is a really valuable way to see people and to hear poetry. And I want to keep this Zoom reading series going on. So I'm gonna keep it up. And I've got all my smart people around me who know how to do the legwork with it, so I can just put my ugly mug on and speak for too long when I need to do these things. But great to see everybody again. And thank you so much.